So we know that Pokemon Go is going to be under new ownership. Scopely Inc. is going to be coming in and taking over the development of Pokemon Go, but from everything that we've heard, it seems like the people that are currently working on Pokemon Go are going to remain the same. I'm a little bit suspicious on whether or not that is actually going to be true, but at the very least, I think what Scopely Inc. and the current Niantic development team need to understand is that the future of Pokemon Go is going to be dependent on them fixing one major issue with the game. Alright, what's happening everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's get right into it. So, one of the things that I've been really bothered by when it comes to Pokemon Go for the past several years is in regards to the rural gameplay issue. Without question, Pokemon Go is a very fun game if you live in a major city. The reason why I say that is because you have access to pretty much unlimited resources when it comes to Pokeballs and different items, and you're gonna have a whole bunch of Pokemon spawns at your disposal. So really, it's not going to be an issue for you to get the Pokemon that you want, to always have a good stock of items, and you're going to continuously be able to play Pokemon Go even if you're a bit stationary, because there's just so much for you to do within a major city. But if you live in an area that's outside of a major city, like a suburb or a rural area, the gameplay is going to feel incredibly different, especially if you live in a rural area. I see it all the time among people within my own chat groups. When I go on Reddit, there is going to be players out there who have to drive, let's say 30 minutes just to get access to Pokestops and gyms. That's just the nature of where they are currently located. So now that Scopely Inc. is going to be coming in and taking over Pokemon Go, there is a lot of things that they could do to make the game a much better experience for these specific players. There's been a lot of ideas that have been thrown around within the Pokemon Go community, like maybe having some sort of legal spoofing method that they could charge for. I don't know if that's the direction that will be healthy for Pokemon Go, but that is certainly an idea that's being floated around. But I really think ultimately what it comes down to is, for one, they need to lift the restrictions on remote raid passes. I think they could start with that. And then of course, they need to come up with different ways to get players items that doesn't involve spending Pokecoins. I mean, one of the biggest things that players often do to stay stocked up on items is of course opening and sending gifts. I really like that as kind of a starting point. Maybe with your free daily gift that you get every single day in the Pokeshop, maybe the items that you get out of that is going to be compounded by how many points of interest are actually around you within a certain vicinity. I really do not know what direction they could go, but I think ultimately what they need to do is relook how they do a lot of the gameplay loops in Pokemon Go. The fact that you're so reliant on having so many points of interest around you, it makes it very difficult for those who live in very isolated areas. And I know there's going to be people out there who are going to make the argument that yeah, that's the nature of a location-based game, that if you're playing a game like Pokemon Go that requires geolocation data, it's really going to be dependent on where you're located. I totally understand that. It's not meant to be a fair game because for people who live in major cities, they're naturally going to have more access because there's going to be a lot more points of interest. That's just naturally how it is. But I still feel like they could do more. I still feel like they could level the playing field just a little bit, because as of right now, when it comes to Pokemon Go, it is an absolute miserable experience if you do not live in a high population area. Believe me, there have been times where I've played Pokemon Go in, let's say, remote islands, like when I took my vacation to the Maldives. I was playing on a private island and there was only 1 or 2 Pokestops along with a gym. And even though the entire island was a resort and there was a lot of potential for a variety of different points of interest, because not a lot of Pokemon Go players have actually visited that island, they did not make those Pokestops and missions over time. So it's really difficult to play in those conditions. You really do not have access to anything. Obviously, you do not have the numbers to take down raids, and you're going to run out of Pokeballs extremely quickly, especially if you're reliant on stuff like the incense and different things like that in order to even get Pokemon spawns. It's just such a difficult time, and I can't imagine anyone would find that to be any kind of fun. So this is the experience for a lot of players. I feel like when you look online and you see the complaints of a majority of players, it's really a lot of these people who live in areas where they just simply do not have access. And a lot of those players end up spoofing. I mean, I've certainly been very vocal about how I feel about spoofing, but in a lot of ways I can totally understand why anyone would spoof, especially if they live in a remote area. Like, it just makes sense for them, because otherwise, how are they going to enjoy the game? That's just something that I feel like Niantic could address. If Niantic does not like spoofing, I mean, right now it's definitely a point of discussion, but if they do not like people cheating in their game, if Scopely doesn't like people cheating in their game, then rather than just doing a huge ban wave on spoofers, they should really have gameplay that would promote players not to spoof, you know? Like remote raids, that was a big thing with that. Once they released the remote raid pass and they allowed you to be able to do a whole bunch of raids from home, a lot of people just simply started to stop spoofing. I think that was such a big deal, in my opinion. A lot of the people that I talk to who spoof, they feel like they do not need to spoof anymore because of the remote raid pass. But because Niantic nerfed it to the ground, suddenly you saw a huge influx of spoofers once again. So I really do think this is the direction that Niantic needs to go. Rather than just taking on a lot of these cheaters by just banning them, what they need to do is create gameplay that promotes healthier, more I guess gameplay that's in line with the terms of service. That's probably the better way to go. Now, I don't want to make this a discussion about spoofing. I really just wanted to give this message to Scopely Inc. When you start taking over Pokemon Go, when you start developing a lot of the new gameplay mechanics and try to change up the game to better align with your core philosophies, I really do think one of the things you all need to take into consideration is the experience for people all around. Whether they live in a rural area, whether they live in an urban area, try to create gameplay experiences that allows a lot of these players to have a bit of a shared experience. If you live in a rural area, your experience is going to be terrible. That's just naturally how it's been for the past several years. But I do think Scopely Inc. could do something about that. I think there's a lot of different things that they could do immediately. Like I mentioned earlier, unnerfing remote raids would be a huge start. But I think there's a lot of things they could do to allow players to still feel rewarded, even if they're not catching as many Pokemon as other players, if they're not spinning as many Pokestops as other players. Maybe they could do something about that. I think something like the Daily Adventure Incense is a really good place to start. Like, that item is amazing. The fact that it's a free item that you could use every single day if you're out and about walking around. It doesn't matter if you're in a high population area. It doesn't matter if you're in a low population area. It really doesn't matter if you're in a big city or a rural area. If you're just walking around, you're going to have a whole bunch of Pokemon spawning, and some of them are going to be very rare legendaries. And I think that's great. I think something like that would prove a lot better than what they've been trying as of late. Like routes and party play, a lot of that stuff requires you to be with a lot of other players. You know, maybe that's the direction that they should go. Maybe have a lot more solo content, stuff that you could do when you're at home or when you're just by yourself or you're not in a high population area. You know, I think a lot of the game design is geared towards you being in a massive community, and it's just not working for a lot of players. You know, raid battles, Gigantamax, Pokemon battles, like a lot of this stuff requires just so many trainers. And a lot of players just simply do not have access to that, unless they're spending ham over fist on remote raid passes. And I just feel like the direction of Pokemon Go, it's really going to be contingent on how they fix the rural issue, and I am really curious to see what they end up doing. I really hope they end up getting this message. I think us as a Pokemon Go community need to be very vocal about the rural issue, and hopefully Niantic will listen. Hopefully Scopely Inc. will listen, and they'll go in a direction for Pokemon Go that will produce longevity and actually fix a lot of these long-standing issues. But in any case, that's going to be it for this video. I just wanted to share my thoughts regarding this one thing, because when I really think about the future of Pokemon Go, I am very cautiously optimistic. I do think there's going to be a lot of positive changes and also about a lot of negative changes, but I do think Pokemon Go is going to be in a much better place with the new owner. But I also feel like there's a lot of things that they need to do to address a lot of the problems that players have been facing, and I think the rural issue is the biggest one. So hopefully we're just gonna have to wait and see. I am very hopeful, but yeah, it's really going to depend on really what Scopely Inc. wants out of Pokemon Go. There's a lot of money that they could make by fixing the role issue. Let me tell you that right now. The remote raid pass nerf, it must have cut into their revenue without question. I personally, if there was just one change that they could do, unnerf remote raid passes. I've said it numerous times in this video, but it's just common sense at this point. Yeah, it's just, I just really hope that's where they start. But in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. Do you agree with everything that I said, or do you disagree with anything that I said? I would really like to know your thoughts. Maybe I'm completely off base with everything that I talked about. If I am, then make sure you share your reasons why you think that in the comments below, and hopefully we can have a great discussion. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget the notification bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. Real quick, let me give a shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the Conscience Flow channel, if you want to support everything that I do, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon, because the best way you can support me is by becoming a paid Patreon member. And if you decide to do that, I'm going to add you to my Pokemon Go friends list, and that means for stuff like remote raids, opening and sending gifts, different things like that. If you want to interact with me in Pokemon Go, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon, the links to which will be in the description below. And if you want to support my channel in a completely different way, you're always welcome to do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. You'll see me on the platforms that are on the bottom of your screen, and make sure you go over there and give me a follow. That will be a huge help. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, and love yourself today, and I'll catch you all later.